That's a big ass fish. That's a monster, Mike. Good job.
And that's why we're obviously outdoorsmen. And it is first light on this Saturday morning. Good morning, everybody. I am Mike with Obviously Outdoorsman, and First Light calls for another First Light Talk. This is number 23. If you guys are new to the First Light Talk series, these podcasts come out every single morning, hunting, fishing, just always an outdoor topic. And this is here for the people waking up early, just getting after it. And just every morning between 6 and 8 a.m., a new podcast drops. And stay tuned. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, the whole nine, the works. Just follow us if you like the content, comment if you like it or don't like it, and just give some feedback. I appreciate you guys. If you give some feedback and you follow us, you can always unfollow us later. But today's topic, failed trips turned into success. All right, and really, I have one that stands out in my mind, and it's with me and Rob, and that basically was a brown trout trip. Well, it originally started as a steelhead trip that turned into a brown trout sleigh fest. But before we get into that, I want to start with today's current news article, and this one comes from livescience.com, and it is titled, "Brown Bear Wakes Up from Hibernation and Kills 38 Reindeer Calves." Yes, 38 calves after it wakes up from hibernation. It just woke up and he said, "I'm hungry." It just went on a rampage and tore through this herd of reindeer. All right, and it says some bears are more aggressive than others, researchers say. And it's like, okay, more aggressive or just hungry? This bear has been hibernating for who knows how long, and it just went on a rampage and ate. It just killed 38 calves and just ate and just filled its stomach up trying to gain some calories back after the long hibernation. And they also say a highly predatory brown bear woke up from hibernation and killed these reindeer in a single month. Okay, in a single month. So let's just say on a longer month, 31 days, this bear killed 38. All right, that's 8 more than the month is long. So some days it just said, okay, 2 are dying today. I'm super hungry. But then they go on to say, the next month, this bear went on to kill 18 young moose. All right, not just the cat, not reindeer calves, moose, and they're big animals. That's a lot of food. And they go on and say it's a 13-year-old female that was one of 15 brown bears that they tracked in northern Sweden to understand how bears used their landscape. And they basically found out that the brown bears changed habitats to basically base their movements around their prey. So depending where the brown bear, or dependent on where the reindeer and the moose were in the spring, that's exactly where these bears occupied, depending on how hungry they were, what the population of their prey were, and that's where they were. Wherever their food was, that's where the predators were, and that should be obvious. And they said that some of the bears killed more than others, and they start talking about why are some bears more predatory. And I think it's pretty simple to say that just some bears are more aggressive, for one, and some are bigger, so they're more hungrier, so they have to eat more, and that means they have to kill more. And with this study that they were doing on these Sweden bears, they GPS collared a bunch of bears between 2010 and 2012 and recorded the bears' kills. And dependent on the calving period for reindeer, so when the reindeers were freshly born and they were calves, these brown bears moved to a higher elevation because that's where they were. And the same thing with the moose. So let's say that they're in an open landscape, depending on the time of the year, like summertime when they're grazing out and about. And then when they're freshly born and they know that they're more vulnerable, then they would go up into the deciduous forests, according to the article. They have to be specific with deciduous, and that's a type of tree, by the way, a deciduous tree, if you guys don't know that. But it basically allows them to hunt better when it's not just an open field. Once these bears go up into the mountains, a higher elevation, they're easier to they have an easier stalk. They have an easier hunt. But that's just absolutely insane on the fact that this one bear went on a tear and killed 38 reindeer calves, and then it went on and killed 18 young moose. I just think that's amazing. And you know what? That happens more often than you would think. Just not even brown bears, but let's just say black bears. And even in places where you don't even think black bears should be, like Jersey. And Jersey is one of the highest populated states for black bear across the country. And it's Jersey. There's not a lot of woods, and I think it's the highest populated state per like capita. I don't know how exactly it is. But it's amazing because there's a theory that New Jersey black bears don't have a true hibernation period because it's a shorter winter and depending on the temperatures and blah, blah, blah. But according to the weather, if it's just a hard winter, they will go on some type of hibernation mode and they will just feed up beforehand, and then once the snow hits hard, these bears go into hibernation. And then it doesn't have to be in like a cave to where everyone thinks that bears hibernate in caves. It doesn't have to be that. It could just be a depression in the ground, up against a giant down tree in just a giant root ball. They could basically hibernate anywhere. And then when they say hibernation, they're just getting in a place where they're out of the direct weather and they're just going to sleep. They're just using very little energy so they could get through the colder months because they're using more energy than it takes for them to find food. They're finding less food, so it basically makes sense for them just to go to sleep and not waste their energy. They fatten up beforehand and now they're just sleeping. So I just thought that was a cool article where brown bears wakes up and kills 38 reindeer calves and then 18 moose. So I just think that was awesome. But back to this article, okay. Failed trips turned into successful trips, and I want you guys to definitely hear me out on this. All right, there will be many trips that your plans just don't go as planned, and more often than not, this will happen. It's out of your control, and being able to just adjust and be adaptable is the best thing you can do. Instead of just turning around and going home or toughing it out to a bad outcome, then switch it up and turn your worst trip into your best trip. And we've done that many times. Me and my group, me and Rob, obviously Outdoorsmen in general, we've had times where we plan something and then by the end of the trip, we're doing something completely different because we're adapting. We go out there on a bass bite and it's like a slow pick on a bass. And then we pull up on like one cove and there's just a bajillion 1 pound crappie in the hole. And instead of bass fishing, we come out with full limits of crappie and just have an amazing fish fry at the end of the day. So you could just turn it up and make a slow trip, a great trip, or a shitty trip, an amazing trip. All right. It all depends on how you look at it, how, if you're optimistic or pessimistic. If you get there and it's crap and you just go home, then you're really not going to have a good trip. But if you get there and you're like, okay, well, maybe over there, then maybe you could just have a great trip. But one trip in particular, me and Rob went on, and I want to tell the story. Me and Rob went on a full send, a 5.5 hour full send. And because we were just like, screw it, let's try it. We had a thought in our mind. I think we were just talking one night and we're like, hey, you have work tomorrow? No. You got work tomorrow? I get out at 3 a.m. And it was like, okay, you want to go right after you get out of work? It's like, sure, I'll just stay up. I'll have some Red Bull. So I got out of work. I went up and met Rob and we started our 5.5 hour ride up to northwestern New York to try and get on some steelhead. And that was the original plan, to go to northwestern New York and just try our luck on big steelhead in a tiny creek where the year prior we absolutely slayed. And I mean slayed. We crushed them. So we wanted to see if it was the same type of time frame to where normal steelhead were running everywhere else, if they would be in the same creek. Because we got on the steelhead up there in like April. And that's not really like prime steelhead time. That's not when you think steelhead is like, okay, let's go fish steelhead. It's April. It was warmer when we went out there. So it was November, and this is when we normally go out to like Pulaski and the Salmon River to fish for steelhead. So we were like, you know what? Let's just see if they're there. All right. It's like mid-November. Let's just give it a shot. Everywhere else, they're packed with steelhead right now. So we drove throughout the night and got there as soon as the sun started cracking. And we got out at Dunkin' Donuts, and I mean, it's windy. It's like 20, 30 mile an hour gusts. It was just like, wow, it's freezing. We had our thermals on, our base layers on, our insulated jackets. We were just packed to the brim trying to stay warm. It was just freezing and the wind was cutting through us. And immediately we're like, well, hopefully this creek pans out and this was all worth it. That's what we're thinking in our mind. All right, we got like glazed donuts, we got jelly donuts, we got coffee, and it was freezing. And the spot that we were going to was a feeder creek that the steelhead ran into, and they basically got stuck because they couldn't go any farther because there was like a tall waterfall that was like concrete, and there was no possible way for them to get up it. So it was just like shooting fish in a barrel, to where they were just loaded within the first 300 yards of coming off of this waterfall. So when they're in there good. So we get there at sunrise and we get strapped up like we're preparing for war, like waders, vest, tying rigs, get the sunglasses, get our hats, and then we hike in and check the river, and it looks like it was just a desert. There was nothing there. The creek was empty. There wasn't even a minnow or a fly. There was no type of wildlife in this creek when we got there in mid-November. And I mean, it was cold. It was like 20 degrees and 30-mile-an-hour wind. So, I mean, it was freezing. And there wasn't a single fish, not a one. And we were just like, well, this sucks. We just did all this, and you got no sleep, and I got no sleep because I drove. And it's like, well, what do we do? Do we go home? Do we try fishing for bass because it's right next to one of our best bass spots that we have up there? So we drove down the road and we started fishing for bass. And I mean, Rob casted a spinnerbait and he casted it straight out in front of him, and it basically got blown behind him across the road into the other side of the lake. And it was just like that windy. So we were just like, okay, do we turn around and go home? It's 20 degrees and it's cold and windy. And I've been scoping out a place since the first time I went up there, and I'm not going to disclose the name because it's been under a lot of heat lately. A lot of people's been figuring it out, and just diarrhea of the mouth. People's just been spreading the word, and it's almost burning the spot. And that's probably going to be tomorrow's podcast, FLT 24. It's going to be the topic of spot burning and what it is, first off, spot burning, and why it's detrimental to fishing spots. But I said, let me plug in how far this spot is. Okay, I've been wanting to hit it. I've been doing just a little bit of research and Google mapping, and you guys can do this too. A lot of your research and new spots, all you have to do is Google map and just go, okay, cool. And then do a lot of external research to where it's like, okay, where are these fish like to hang out? What's best for them? These points, these eddies, deep pockets. Just do a lot of online research and then Google map it and find out where, like, basically the puzzle piece that fits into it. And it's like, okay, they should be right here. And then just have it in the back of your mind. So we had our initial trip, and I had a backup plan, but it wasn't a wanted backup plan. We wanted the steelhead to be there. But I plugged it into Google Maps, and it was like another 20 minutes. So we said, let's try it, okay? We're up here. We're not just going to turn around and go home. We're not like that. Let's just try it, okay? And again, it was another feeder creek, but this creek, it basically turned into like this creek turned into like a river, which turned into like a bigger bay, which is much closer to Lake Ontario. So it's closer to the Great Lakes. So I felt like shit from drinking about 15 Red Bulls, and I felt like my heart was going to implode. So I said, Rob, just go down and check it out. I just need like a minute. I'm just going to lay down for like 15 minutes, and then I'll come down and meet you. Let me know if it's good. Okay, I just need to lay down, or I'm just going to pass out, or you got to take me to the hospital or something. So I laid down. I closed my eyes, and Rob walks down. And I just closed my eyes, and 30 seconds later, Rob's banging on the window. And I lower the window, and he's like, browns. Big browns everywhere. I don't want to make a scene. And there was like 2 other cars in the parking lot. It really didn't matter. But he was like, I don't want to make a scene. There's giant browns everywhere. So I'm just like, okay, I'm game. Let's get it. All right. My heart palpitations basically just went away immediately. And I got out. I grabbed my rod. And Rob's really never caught brown trout before this trip. So I get down there and I'm like, holy crap, these are trophy fish. And I walk down there. And it's just fire. I mean, spawning browns, there's salmon everywhere, mid-November, freezing weather, and just a fire bite. We turned a bust of a trip into an unforgettable experience. Rob gets on his first brown trout, and it's like 8 to 10 pounds. He just got spoiled off the rip, okay? I'm used to Jersey, like native browns and stockies to where they were like 12 to 18, 20 inches. Okay, his first brown is just a mega, and it's thick, a hook jaw giant brown. And then we go just on a spree of trading off. I'd catch one, Rob catch one. I'd catch one, Rob catch one, and on and on and on. And then I caught one that basically matched Rob's first brown, just like between an 8 and 10 pounder, except mine was a female. And it was my biggest brown trout. So this one trip, we go from no steelhead bust. Do we go home or do we try the spot? We try a new spot. We both have personal best brown trouts. And we pulled out fresh giant king salmon, giant browns. We got fresh chromers, and I mean like chrome to where like you could see your reflection in their skin. That's how chrome they were. And we went from starting the day with being down in the dumps because of a bus trip and turned it into a slammer day. Don't just give up on your plans if they don't come through. Adapt and roll with the constant punches that life is giving you, and you may end up in a new spot that's much better than where you were even planning on going. And let me tell you what, if you've never fished in 20-degree weather and freezing water to where you can't stand in the water for more than 5 minutes without having to come out just to gain feeling back in your toes, it's easy to get discouraged when it's this cold and crappy out. But roll with it and you'll be happy you did more often than not. But do the research. Don't just go out there blindly. All right, sometimes you may just like a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then, but do the research. You don't want to walk out there blindly because then you're just walking into you don't know what. The internet is so powerful. You can basically do 80% of your scouting just from on your phone. No matter where you are, you can just do 90% of your scouting. All right, I just moved down to Florida. Everywhere I've been going is from Google Maps. I go, that spot looks good. Oh, look, a saltwater brackish creek runs into here. Oh, look, and there's bass and snook mixed in. It's like I'm just going on Google Maps, and this is basically all of our fishing spots. We'll learn something and then just Google map it and just do a lot of research until we learn it and perfect it or try and perfect it, and we just give it a shot. And sometimes it's a bust, and sometimes we go trying to catch bass and we end up catching giant walleye, or there's pike there, or there's smallmouth or muskie. All right, it's a lot of times it doesn't go as planned. All right, if it does go as planned, great, because you've done the research and it worked out. If it doesn't go as planned and you roll with the punches and you end up catching like giant crappie instead of bass, then kudos to you. You learned something else. You got some great intel. All right, and at the very least, you know what you just did. You don't do it again. So it gave you some valuable information not to go at that time of year or at that temperature or if it's that windy. All right, it gains intelligence. You have your experience and you know not to do it again. So scope it out on Google Maps. All right, aerial views of locations and points and waterfalls and eddies and maybe a rock cliff. Just have plan B, plan C, plan D in your mind as a backup, just in case your initial plan falls through and tanks. Stay with it and have a slammer day, my guys. All right, just grind and don't give up. All right, don't just go out there and say, well, I've had a crap day, I'm going home. Just grind it out. All right, because if me and Rob, because I know we were both thinking it, but we didn't want to be the one to say, let's go home. If we just got there to the steelhead spot, there was nothing there and we just went home, we would have never had the spot. And now since that time that we hit that brown trout spot the first time, we've been going back there every year and we have just been killing it. And you know what? We found out in the spring, this spot is loaded with steelhead like the other creek was. And I mean giant steelhead. All right, this past spring when we were out there, we crushed them. I mean, I didn't do too well. I caught like 9,000 creek chubs because they were just sucking my egg before it even got to the steelhead. But Rob and everyone else in the group, they crushed them. All right, and I also had the bad side of the river. Okay, just in my defense, the drift, you cannot really fish properly from the other side of the river unless they're closer to you, and basically you're fishing for them at your feet if you're on that side of the river. The other side, you have the perfect drift and you basically just float it in there and you got a steelhead almost every other cast. It's just amazing. But this spot was just loaded with steelhead, and If we never checked it out that first time, we may have checked it out a different time, but we were missing out on plenty of missed opportunities if we never checked it out. So basically, just try and do everything you can and turn it into from a failed trip into a successful trip. Even with hunting, all right? I know this was mostly about fishing, but even with hunting, there's so many times where I'm out there sitting in a stand and just some douchebag comes by on a dirt bike and just rips it through the woods and basically just ruins my hunt. All right? You know what? Tyler's first buck, and I actually have a couple stories like this. Tyler's first buck, way back in like 2017, I don't even know how long ago it was, 2016 maybe. When we were sitting in the stand, it was like an hour before dark, and we had this nice 8-pointer coming in, and a guy walks all the way up. I saw this guy come from like 600 yards away, and I'm like, dude, it's the magic hour, and you are just killing it. I didn't say a word. Tyler wanted to leave. He was just like, dude, nothing's going to come in. And I'm like, he didn't really make a lot of noise. He came in. I don't even know what the guy did, but he walked from 600 yards away to about like 100 yards away, stopped, did something by a tree, and left. But he was pretty quiet about it. He didn't make a ton of noise. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe if these deer saw him, maybe they think he just baited or something. And they didn't spook. I didn't see anything spook. No one blew the whistle and alerted. Right? So let's just sit. Right? This guy walks away. Not 10 minutes later, here comes this 8-pointer, and Tyler makes a shot on him. All right? Don't give up too early. Make your failed trips a successful trip, and just keep hammering, guys. All right? That's a Cam Hanes saying right there. So just keep hammering, keep slinging them arrows, and just don't give up and keep grinding. All right, I am Mike. Thank you for listening to FLT number 23. And again, check these out on YouTube. Check us out on Instagram, Facebook. Just follow us and just the works. Check out our social media platforms. If you have any questions, email me at obviously.outdoorsmen@gmail.com, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. I'm pretty good with that. I get back within 10 minutes normally if you just contact me. And just share this video or podcast with your buddy, your mother, your father, and just spread the word, guys. I'm out here trying to gather some hunters from the hunting community, fishing community, and just trying to bring everyone closer together, trying to teach something new to someone every day. If I could just teach something simple to someone new every single day that they didn't know, that would just greatly gratify me. So if you have a new hunter friend, or if you are a new hunter, thank you for listening, and send your new outdoorsman to me. All right, whether it be fisherman or hunter, this outdoor podcast, every single day, a new podcast. All right, but I am Mike with Obviously Outdoorsman. Thank you for listening, and tune in tomorrow for FLT number 24 on the topic of spot burning. All right, guys, have a great day. Peace out.